There I was, sitting alone in that small, dimly lit lobby, the silence pressing down on me like a heavy weight. The fan above me hummed, but the sound felt almost unnatural, as if it was struggling to stay alive. I shifted uncomfortably in the plastic chair, the dust floating in the stagnant air like forgotten memories. I glanced around again, noticing how lifeless everything seemed. The receptionist's desk sat empty, the phone on it silently mocking my presence. No emails, no direct contact, just the job posting, vague and mysterious. I had already started second-guessing myself. Why had I thought this would be easy? The building, the way it looked, felt wrong. It wasn't just old, it was abandoned. Yet, the parking lot was empty except for one other car. Like this place had been waiting for me, almost. Anticipating my arrival, as I sat there, the minutes stretched on like hours. I stared at the dust-covered fan blades, wondering if they had been spinning for decades without anyone around to notice. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing down the empty hall, growing louder as they approached. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The door to the back office creaked open. I stood up instinctively, my eyes scanning for any sign of life. A man stepped into the lobby, tall, dressed in a dark suit that seemed out of place in such a forgotten building. His face was pale, gaunt, and his eyes were the most unsettling part. Hollow, like they had seen too much, yet still managed to look hungry. "Christopher?" he asked, his voice soft, almost a soft. I nodded, my mouth dry. "Yeah, Daniel, right." He didn't respond immediately, just gave me a long, almost unsettling stare. His hand slowly reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a folder thick, with papers that looked far too old for something that had only been recently printed. "We have some forms for you to fill out," he said. His words trailed off as he handed me the folder. I hesitated before taking it, the cold paper sending a chill through my fingertips. There was something about him, about this whole situation, that made every instinct in me scream to run. But I didn't. "Come with me," Daniel said, his tone shifting to something more commanding. "We'll do the interview in the back." I followed him, my footsteps echoing down the hallway, every sound amplified in the empty space. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, unsettling shadows against the walls. The deeper we went, the more the air seemed to thicken, heavy with a stale, metallic scent. Finally, we reached a door at the end of the hall. Daniel opened it, revealing a dimly lit room that smelled faintly of mildew. A table sat in the middle of the room, with two chairs on either side. One was already occupied by a man whose face I couldn't make out in the low light, but I could feel his gaze on me. Daniel gestured for me to sit. "Go ahead," he said, a small, almost forced smile on his lips. "We're ready for you." I couldn't tell if this was an interview, or if I was walking into something far worse than I could have imagined. But I sat down. There was no turning back now. The whole situation felt increasingly bizarre, but I didn't have the luxury of second-guessing myself. The fast pace of it all was like a warning bell I couldn't quite place, but the idea of easy money kept me there, hovering just beyond the point of no return. I followed Joshua down the dim hallway, the lights flickering overhead, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. The metal door at the end of the hall stood out like a scar, unpainted, covered in dents as if it had been through hell and back. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but there I was, trapped in a cycle of decisions that felt too far gone to reverse. We arrived at a small security office, tucked away behind a brown painted door with a simple plaque that read "Security Office." Inside, it was as sterile as I imagined. A single desk, a monitor with a row of cameras, and a small drawer with miscellaneous tools. But there was no warmth here, no sense of comfort. Everything was cold, clinical, almost suffocating. Joshua handed me a set of keys, his eyes never meeting mine for more than a fleeting second, and continued in a hurry, his voice tense. "Here's your keychain," he said, pointing to a small bundle of keys. "This one opens the door to the office. The others control the shutters and exterior doors. You're also going to need this flashlight." He handed me a mag light. Its cold weight uncomfortable in my hand. "You can use it as a baton if things get rough. But remember, you stay in this office, watch the feeds, and lock yourself in if you see anything out of the ordinary. Call us if something happens. Don't patrol. We don't have a partner for you, and I don't want you wandering around. The front gate's the only one you need to lock. The rest ignore them." I nodded, but I felt uneasy, like I was receiving instructions to a game I didn't quite understand. Joshua seemed in a rush, almost too much so. The whole place had an unsettling air of urgency, as if they couldn't afford another night without someone on watch. And yet, everything about it screamed something was off, like the clock was ticking down to something far worse than I could imagine. "Any questions?" Joshua asked, already halfway out the door. I opened my mouth to ask about the other doors, the ones in the long hallway, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't shake the image of the broken door with the wire mesh window, the dark cloth obscuring the view inside. And the way Joshua acted, jittery and skittish, it was as if he was trying to get me in and out as quickly as possible. "No," I said finally, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. "I'm good." Joshua didn't say another word. He just turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving me alone in the dimly lit security office. The cameras on the monitors flickered to life, showing grainy, static-filled images of the surrounding area, the front gate, the exterior, and the shadows beyond. I sat down at the desk, the weight of the silence pressing in on me. The hum of the fluorescent lights was the only sound, and the air in the room felt thick, like something was waiting for me to make a move. I hesitated. Should I check the cameras? Lock the front gate as instructed? Or maybe explore those other doors? I stared at the page in the binder, my hands shaking as I read the absurd, cryptic rules that filled the single sheet. The whole thing felt like some twisted joke. "The long hallway is off limits," I repeated under my breath, my mind reeling. "Do not look at the hallway for prolonged periods." What kind of job had I walked into? The instructions seemed insane, and I could feel a cold sweat forming on my brow. The worst part, the rules didn't seem like they were meant for a regular security job. They were warnings about things that shouldn't exist, things that, if I wasn't careful, might happen. I tried to focus. I had 9 hours left, just 9 hours before I could get out. But the longer I stayed, the more my nerves wore thin. I locked the front door, sealed myself in the security office, and the clock started ticking. Every minute felt like an eternity, my every sense on high alert. I tried to distract myself, flipping through the binder again, but nothing made sense. The first rule, do not look at the hallway for prolonged periods. I could feel the weight of it, like some unseen presence was watching me from there, waiting for me to make a mistake. The instructions were specific. The hallway wasn't just off limits, it was a warning zone. Something I wasn't supposed to understand, but something I had to obey. I glanced at the clock, to 17 a.m. The coffee machine would turn on soon. I didn't know why, but I had to follow the instructions. It was the only thing that seemed to make sense in this madness. I placed the cup beneath the machine as directed and stood by, watching the seconds tick away. As soon as the coffee finished dispensing, I opened the security office door and just a crack, then slid the cup outside. A chill ran down my spine as the door clicked shut behind me. I was supposed to leave it there, not touch it, and definitely not open the door again. I sat back down, tension growing in my chest. The minutes crawled by, but then the silence broke, a soft knocking. Tap, tap, tap. At first, I thought it was just my nerves, but the sound grew more distinct. Then came the scratching, faint but unmistakable, like something or someone was trying to get in. I checked the cameras, nothing, The hallways remained empty, but my mind refused to quiet. What had just made that sound? I couldn't help but glance at the long hallway on the monitor. The camera flickered. A shadow. It was there again. The same persistent shape that had been creeping in the corner of my vision, no matter how much I tried to ignore it. I turned off the camera feed, just as I had been told. But something in my gut told me I wasn't done with it yet. The shadow didn't move, but it seemed to be waiting for me. I checked my watch again. The time felt like it was slipping away faster than I could keep track. A distant, muffled sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the building, something like a groan, or a low moan. I froze, the breath caught in my throat. Was it just the building settling? Or was something in there, with me? I shined my flashlight at the dark corner of the room where the shadow had been, but it only seemed to stretch longer, darker, as if it were mocking me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was waiting, watching, moving just outside the reach of the lights. And no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the rules kept echoing in my mind. Do not leave the office until sunrise. The dread clawed at my chest, but I didn't have the luxury of leaving. Not yet. As the minutes dragged on, I thought about the woman's voice. The instructions had been so specific. If you hear a female voice, do not go near it. Do not look at her face. I shivered at the thought. Was she here, waiting? Would she speak? Or would something else happen first? I glanced at the cameras again, and my heart skipped a beat. On the building to feed, I saw something move. Not quite human, not quite anything I could describe, but it was there, shifting in the shadows, just out of sight. And still, I stayed, locked in this office, counting the seconds. I couldn't stop shaking as I typed, my hands trembling and my thoughts scattered. The events of the past few hours felt like a nightmare that was too real to ignore. At 3:45 a.m., I heard the woman's voice. At first, it was just a whisper, a low murmur in a language I couldn't recognize. Or maybe it was gibberish, but it felt wrong. The whispering grew louder and louder, overwhelming everything around me. It wasn't just in my ears anymore, it was in my mind, vibrating through my skull, reverberating inside me. It hurt. It felt like my brain was about to crack under the pressure of it. I thought about waiting it out until 4:02, like the instructions said, but I couldn't take it. The sound was driving me mad. I bolted out of the office, my heart pounding as I rushed past the dust-covered receptionist desk, fumbling with my keys to unlock the door at the end of the hallway. As soon as I opened it, the screaming stopped. The room inside was hazy, dim, and oppressive. I could barely make out anything in the darkness, but I saw a woman sitting across the room. She motioned for me to come in and sit down. I couldn't explain why, but I walked toward her. My footsteps made no sound, and everything around me felt muffled, as if the air itself was pressing in. But as soon as I sat down, something inside me snapped. I heard the most terrifying, inhuman scream from the darkness, so loud and raw it pierced through my bones. I didn't look back, I ran. I didn't stop until I was safely locked back in the security office, my heart still racing. I thought that would be the worst of it, but when the clock struck 4 a.m., everything changed again. I heard a blood-curdling scream from the lobby on the camera feed. I saw something not human. It was dark, larger than a person, but I couldn't remember its shape. All I knew was that it felt wrong, like the air itself was thicker with malice. The creature, or whatever it was, ran across the hallway, slamming against the doors and walls, its screams echoing through the building. I watched it through the cameras, frozen in terror. Then, it looked directly at the camera, and that's when I saw it. It had no eyes, its face. I couldn't see it clearly, but I felt its gaze, and that was enough. It was like it was looking into me, into my soul, studying me. At first, there was curiosity, but that curiosity twisted into something else. Hatred, pure, raw hatred. I could feel it in every fiber of my being, and I knew it wanted me dead. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. I knew that, if it could, it would have ripped me apart in an instant. The longer I looked, the more intense that hatred became, until it was the only thing I could feel. I was sure that if I didn't do exactly what the rules told me, if I made one wrong move, that thing would find a way to kill me. I just stared, paralyzed, as it continued to run, screaming and thumping its way across the hallway. All I could do was watch, and hope the clock would finally tick to sunrise. The air in the security office felt thick with dread as the minutes ticked by. Time seemed to lose all meaning, warping in that strange, distorted space between reality and whatever nightmare this place had become. I couldn't help but feel that something was watching me even as the chaos seemed to settle. At 6:30, I saw something on camera for a man, my build, my hair color, even my face. But there was something deeply wrong about him. It was like looking at a reflection in a cracked mirror. Something about it wasn't right. Before I could fully process it, he vanished, leaving me with a chill that crept down my spine. By 6:57, the rattling of the heavy metal door from the hallway echoed through the building again, this time lasting a solid 20 seconds. Every time it happened, I felt the terror crawl deeper under my skin. The sheer violence of the sound reminded me of the creature's desperation. At 7:13, I caught sight of the receptionist chair on camera only. It wasn't how I had left it. It had tipped over, leaning at an unnatural angle. I froze, staring at the feed. A minute later, I watched it stand back up by itself, its surface undisturbed by any trace of the disturbance. The layer of dust on it didn't change, yet I felt certain something had been there, something had been moving it. Then, at 7:30, camera 16 showed a hallway in building 2-1 that didn't exist in the layout I had memorized. It was outside the building's footprint, stretching impossibly beyond what should have been the building's end. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but when I looked again, it was gone, replaced by the usual empty hallway. At 7:50, I felt it again. Something was wrong. The creature hadn't returned, but the air was thick with an oppressive sense of inevitability. The shadow in the corner of the room seemed to grow heavier. I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. I kept watching the cameras, more out of habit than hope, waiting for the inevitable end of my shift. Would it let me go? Would I make it through the night? Or was I just biding my time until whatever this was claimed me, like it had claimed the others before me? I kept my gaze glued to the clock. Whatever happened, I wasn't leaving until sunrise, but a part of me knew that wouldn't make me safe. I had seen it in its eyes, the creature, the shadow, the thing that waited in the dark. I had seen it, and now it was coming for me. The last entry in the log confirmed my worst fear. I had been hired by an organization that dealt with things that were not meant to exist. The symbols, the shadowy creatures, the strange, impossible occurrences, these were all part of something far bigger, far darker than I could have ever imagined. The symbols on the receptionist's screen, drawn in dust as though they had been left by something, or someone, who wanted to leave a mark. They weren't just arbitrary. They were ancient, purposeful, and I had seen them in places that weren't on any map, in dimensions that didn't follow the rules of space and time. My hands trembled as I recalled the monstrous figure I had glimpsed in the hallway, its eyeless face, the twisted grin, and the oppressive force of its presence. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I should have ever come close to. At 8 a.m., the sun finally began to creep around the edges of the shutters, and I knew I was free, at least for now. I locked the gate, sealed the door, and hurried to my car, almost desperate to escape the building. But, just as I was about to drive away, something forced me to look back. That thing, whatever it was still there. Its gaze pierced through the hallway, and though it was too far to be real, I could feel it. It grinned at me with those unnerving, human-like teeth, its face devoid of eyes but filled with an unnatural hunger. I knew I had to leave. It took everything. I had to pull my gaze away and speed out of there, my car screeching away from the scene. Yet, No matter how far I drove, I could still feel it, the weight of its gaze on my back, burning into me. It was following me, in a way, or at least it was in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and the paranoia gnawed at me even after I arrived home. Now, nothing feels right. I've tried to look for answers, anything to make sense of what I experienced, but there's nothing. The company has vanished. Their website doesn't exist anymore, and when I searched their address, Google Maps had no record of them. There's no history of the company anywhere, no job listings, no reviews. The number on the emergency phone, disconnected. Even the check I received, which seemed like a cruel reminder of my involvement in whatever twisted game this is, came without any traceable information. The worst part, the return address on the check read, Joshua Collins, the very name of the man who had hired me. But there was no contact information beyond that. No record of the company's existence. The letter, however, was enough to make my blood run cold. It thanked me for working for a subsidiary of something called Extranormal Containment Solutions. And that's when it hit me, this had all been part of something far bigger. Extranormal Containment Solutions sounds far too much like the real-life equivalent of organizations like the SCP Foundation, known for handling anomalous entities and artifacts. And now I'm part of this. Somehow, I've been drawn into something that I can't escape from. As I sit here, terrified and alone, I can't help but feel the looming presence of whatever watched me that night. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. If this is anything like the real SCP Foundation, I'd rather not know what comes next. But one thing's for certain, I'm never taking a job offer like that again. When something seems too good to be true, it always is. I've learned my lesson the hard way.